that's a big deal. Okay, we're back to the recording change, but you were talking about Mr. Sands was asking about efficiencies with bus service.
So we are using the most common bus scheduling software that is available. We insisted on having a scheduler included in the renewal of the contract. We didn't have one previously, so it's new to the district in the last 2 years. If there is another product out there that is more effective or more efficient than this one, I'm not currently aware of what it is, and neither is our bus company. So that would involve finding something that either was designed for deliveries in a for-profit organization and modifying it, or finding and then bringing it to our bus company and working with them on how to best use that. I know the question came up repeatedly. I'm not sure how to more thoroughly answer the question at this time. So again, we can push on that. But I would point out that we've recently renewed the contract. It was a very favorable contract in our favor. We've got contractual restrictions. We've got contractual language. We'd have to see how to best work in there. And the bus company is willing to work with us. They're being very collaborative about it.
Well, but I think maybe we should ask some of the other districts, you know, have they found anything better? Because this is an area where change comes pretty quickly.
But we'd have to ask more broadly than the circle in which I'm currently circulating, because right now I can answer that no, not in Connecticut. So I can go more broadly than that. But I don't know of another bus company or another district that's using anything other than Versatrans right now. It's not to say it's not out there. It's just we have to look harder to find that, and maybe find something that wasn't designed for school buses and adapt it to a different use. All of that being said, I wonder about how much more we're going to squeeze out of this.
There were two questions. One is the routes and so on, which
Yep.
is efficiencies. But the other is how often does the bus stop to pick up people? And that's a policy decision or an administrative decision. And that plays into efficiency, I think, much more than the route that the bus takes. And that people have pointed out that in non-very busy streets, it tends to stop at most driveways. Does it have to? And can we speed up the existing routes by not having it stop at every driveway? And I'm not talking about for kindergartners, but for other kids. So I think Ted's question really goes to that also.
That quick answer is yes. We could generate some efficiencies. Again, I don't know what impact it would have at scale, but we could certainly generate more. We could certainly generate fewer stops and more efficiencies if we expected people to walk longer distances to neighborhood stops. That, again, is something where I would caution us not to move quickly.
No.
That's a piece where we're going to want to let people comment on that, and then if we make the change, Mr. Bowden's going to need time to drive out to their driveways and look at their bus stops with them, because that will be a request, and we will have to be able to respond to those requests.
I will say, I mean, I'm on a street where, in fact, there are probably 20 kids that get on in one kind of localized stop, and my very limited experience suggests that we will gain efficiencies at the very edge of the margin, but not one that would solve our school start time issue.
No.
Yeah.
Well, speaking from north of Route 80, where much of the time of the bus routes is generated, I would echo it's worth exploring, especially if we're going to put this off to the next budget cycle.
Yep.
It's even a 5 or 10% efficiency in time could translate into 10 minutes. And 10 minutes could be significant.
So what I can assure the board is that we have been working a little bit more recently with the District Management Council. It is a group that is out of Cambridge. I believe they were one of the contestants for the High Achieving, and they take a very managerial, business-oriented approach to really high-quality instruction, we will take the question to DMC and push and see if their whole component, their whole approach is about instructional, managerial efficiencies to leverage instructional improvement and high-quality learning opportunities. I will be at DMC this week. I will take that as the opportunity. If somebody knows about something else, I think it'll be there that we find it. So I'll pursue it at the next opportunity.
Okay. So let's continue the discussion about this. I think we'll carry it over to the next month's agenda just to kind of get an update in terms of where we are. Okay, good, thanks.
That should conclude my report for the evening.
It does. 10.1 on the agenda is act on a personnel item, and that's specifically to ratify the resignation of Laura Degree, a special ed teacher at Baldwin. Is there, effective January 5th, is there a motion to ratify her resignation?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now, I think you mentioned, Dr. Freeman, you're not going to be replacing this position for the rest of the fiscal year?
We're covering this position. We'll not be bringing in an outside person to fill. So
Right.
we'll be covering this with existing staff members, and Mrs. Hale and Mrs. Brown have met with or have spoken to and are meeting with all of the involved parents in this
Okay.
situation.
Okay. All right. 10.2 is to receive for possible action the ratification of the Guilford Association of Educational Support Services contract. Mr. Kazin, you were on this committee, and maybe you can summarize where we are.
Yes, so the unit has ratified the contract, and we'll just go backwards and discuss the size. This is our second largest unit with approximately 135 members in it. And the negotiations were conducted for the administration, Ms. Trudeau, Mr. Bowden, Dr. Freeman, and Mr. Sands, and Mrs. Sullivan, and I for the Board of Ed. And they took place over the course of the summer and went into the fall, and ultimately culminated in a mediation session at which we reached this result. It's essentially a 2-year contract, though it speaks to a third year. September 1 to June 30, 2017 is the duration. The first 2 years include the salary and benefits increases and specify them, but in 2016 there's a reopener to discuss those items, renegotiate those items, or to negotiate those items. Besides the percentages, which I'll talk about in a moment, we made some language changes to unify the contracts with other bargaining units as to sick leave and as to other leave provisions, and to define the temporary leave days across various categories that have been separately delineated in the previous contract. The most significant non-percentage increase item is shifting to a high deductible health plan, which will commence on July 1, 2005. And starting then, the board's going to fund 65% of the annual deductible, which will be paid at a $2,000 deductible for single-person coverage and $4,000 deductible for family or more than 2 persons in a household. And of course, that coupled with the duration allows us to revisit this in 2017, the year before the Cadillac taxes presently established would go into place. In terms of increases for this calendar year, starting September through 2015 June, it's a 2.4% increase, and the following year will be a 2.25% increase. We've also increased the premium cost share to 17.5% for the PPO for those who remain in the PPO. medical plan, and after July 1, if they continue to remain in it, they would pay, the employees would pay the difference between the employer's total cost of the high deductible health plan and the PPO plan. Finally, we've added a annual written yearly evaluation for members of this unit. So that is a summary. It could also put in the form of the board accepting a motion to accept the contract.
Okay, there's a motion made. Ms. Sullivan, you second? Okay. Questions about this agreement, proposed agreement?
I think there was one other feature to the contract, which is that the two sides agreed to establish a district health and safety committee to look at ways of improving the work conditions and the safety of the employees in the group. And I think that that's something that'll be positive for both sides.
Yep, good. That's good to notice. Okay, thank you. I think just from my reading of this, the board representatives, Mr. Sands, Ms. Sullivan, Mr. Kazin, did an outstanding job on this. This is truly a proposed agreement that is in the interest not only of our staff, but also in the interests of the district as a whole, both educationally and financially. So I know that it was a relatively long process compared to some, and I know that there was a lot of time spent both by the members of the bargaining unit as well as board representatives and the administrations. But it's fair. It's fair. So, yep. And there's not much more you can say about it than that it is fair, and it's in, I think, the interest of the staff, and it's also in our interest to make sure we continue to maintain a quality staff. So.
Just have one minor point. I'm sorry, I was looking at the holidays they have off, and they specified Veterans Day, and it's a 3-year contract. If we were to make a decision about Veterans Day that included a school day, would that be a contractual issue?
Yes, it would become a floating holiday for any of those contractual groups that recognized it as a holiday.
Which is, I think, everybody.
Right.
Yeah. So but we would have to deal with that.
We'd have to give them a substitute day.
But I'm just wondering if that should be changed. That's okay. We can talk about it. I mean, just that it's in there as a holiday off. But
I think it's something that we're going to have to do if we decide to go down that road. We're going to have to do it on a global basis, and so yeah. Probably it's not worth trying to separately negotiate it piecemeal. It's going to be an issue with everybody, but it's going to be the same issue with everybody.
Right.
So, All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, with thanks.
Thank you.
Motion is carried. Where's my agenda, Dr. Myers? Committee reports here. Policy committee, anything going on with the policy committee?
We will be meeting at the end of next month, so we have no report right now.
23rd.
What?
February 23rd.
That's right, exactly right.
I recheck.
Operations committee?
We generally covered it. We talked about dining services program performance last month, and it was better than the previous month. We also went through the capital projects that will be proposed for bonding, and there'll be more about that coming.
Okay. Curriculum committee, we really haven't met since the other meeting, we're meeting at meeting
26th. It looks
yeah, we're
like.
meeting
This
soon.
was 2 weeks from today.
Right.
Yeah.
At Adams. Yeah, my only question would be, I know it's kind of a committee of the whole, it doesn't have a chair, but as far as setting the agenda, how are we?
I think we just do it cooperatively, I think. If there are, does anybody have anything that they'd like to see on that specific agenda?
It'd be a good opportunity for us to discuss Dr. Borland's report internally. I know we'll have the opportunity to discuss with him, but, you know, I think that would be a natural fit, especially with things that might, you know, we talk about.
Yeah, we came out of the last meeting making notes that we wanted to continue the math discussion, and now we have more that we'd like to add to that, some of which does include, I think, previewing some of the responses to the Borland report. And then there were other items on the agenda that we never got to in that meeting, and so I thought we had suggested carrying over the ones that got tabled, but also going deeper into the mathematics discussion. And we've got more on the plate now around mathematics than we had when we met last.
Yeah, why don't we take a look at the last meeting's agenda and see what it looked like, and if we can add something, that's fine. I think you're right. I think we didn't get to several items on the agenda, but.
We talked about naming and math mostly.
Right. That's fine. Okay. Is that all right? Okay. High school building committee?
Meets tomorrow evening. I'll be attending the building committee meeting tomorrow evening.
Okay. Town committee liaisons, anything else going on? Pension committee? Land? Okay. All right. Item 12, public questions. Anybody? Please.
Laura Bauer, 60 Cambridge Way in Guilford. I just wanted to circle back to a couple things quickly, if I could. One was Dr. Borland's report, and I know you've just received it. But in looking at the timeline, if he's coming the second week of February, I think you said, by which point this board will have already hopefully voted to approve a budget to send to the Board of Finance? Did I understand that timeline correctly?
Probably, not necessarily, but probably. But I think what the message is that you know, and I understand, we just got it and you haven't seen it. There are some very obvious, not expensive things to do that we can do, I think. You know, we'll have to consult with the administration that are not going to be a big budget item. I think that there's really only one or two things in this that I think are of such a character that they would have a substantial impact on the budget, and there are things we've been talking about, frankly, like math coaches, that I think Dr. Freeman was not recommending to be included in the 15-16 budget regardless, just because of the other things that we're doing as a district and that the report recommends. So I think that there are. I think, as Dr. Freeman said earlier, there are multiple items within this that we're going to be able to pursue without a budget impact, period, just by doing things differently, like using one test as opposed to another test to assess for placement in the elementary school.
I think it's fair to say that most of his recommendations come down to how we do things. Precious few are about doing things we weren't currently doing. And so when you say that there's little budget impact, doing something differently might involve time, might involve revision of protocols or forms or practices, but it won't have a significant budgetary impact. And those are things that we can begin working on immediately. Things that might have a significant budget impact are fewer, and I think will probably be prioritized into a future work bucket.
You know, and I know you're concerned about the math tracking, and I know, or the programmatic sequencing. There, he makes a couple of alternative suggestions.
Well, I just want to make sure, I mean,
if I can just finish. He makes some suggestions that have no budget impact at all. So if we decide to go down one of those roads, it's whether we do it in February or March makes no difference.
I understand that. But I also just want the subject of math coaches is new to Dr. Borland's report. And it has been something that's, I know, been discussed last year. It's not making it through the, you know, hasn't made it through the budget that you're presenting this year. So I just want to make sure, I guess, that there's, you know, due consideration, I guess, is being given to something like that. And I do understand and appreciate that not all of his suggestions, we can make great impact with suggestions that may not require a lot of funding, but some suggestions are also somewhat easier to implement, I would guess, not having seen this, but
yeah,
you know, they may be things we can implement quickly, but do require money. So I guess I'm just asking, you know, what the kind of leeway is in that timeline in case the presentation comes and you look at this and say, this is something that could be implemented in the relatively short term, but yes, it does require, you know, money. So is there any time left, you know?
Let me just note one thing, that there is actually a math coach that we did fund last year that we weren't able to hire for. So
that still exists.
It's still in the budget. And I didn't see you proposing to take it out of the budget. So that is going to be a programmatic improvement that we can do, assuming we can hire somebody. Do you have an update on that? Right.
Yes, we're going to begin advertising and searching for that position next month because we're not waiting for this money to be approved as part of any new budget. So we will be the first district out looking for that position this year, and we've continued our recruiting efforts.
So that's already done. Budgetarily, that's already in the pipeline. That's already been approved, and so...
But we only have one math coach for the 4 elementary schools.
That would not be for an elementary school position. That
Right.
would be a
No, I
middle
know.
school position.
We don't have any math coaches at the elementary level. We have a math curriculum specialist at the elementary level. We approved one math coach at the middle level next year. That may sound like a fine distinction, but coaches work directly with teachers, and I don't want to suggest that one coach can interact with all of the teachers at the elementary level. Dr. Borland's report that you received tonight is recommending one math coach per elementary school to mirror the structure that we created around literacy coaches at the elementary level. And I am fully in support of that recommendation. Even if we had the money to implement that recommendation, I don't believe we have the capacity to support that kind of change for this September. I want time to build the supports around. I've talked to this board before about that's how coaching fails. When you grab 4 people quickly and throw them into a school and say, make the teachers better, and don't give them the proper training and support that they need. So that is my single favorite recommendation from the report. I wholeheartedly support it, and I will begin efforting to do that immediately, but I want to make sure that we do it properly so that it succeeds as the literacy coaching succeeded in this district.
But to answer your question, it's something we're going to talk about. If it's something, if we think it's an urgent priority and we need to try to move it up, then we have that ability to at least move it forward to the Board of Finance and to the voters.
Okay. The other thing was to go back to Mr. Sand's comment regarding the efficiency of our bus routes. I would implore this board to look into that. The way I've understood it directly from my children's bus drivers is that routing is done by the district. The bus company doesn't make the routes. We make the routes. The routes haven't changed, and I don't know how long. And that is what I'm told by at least a dozen bus drivers that we've met with, with our children. We have a bus. We always have a bus route. Have always had a bus route that's incredibly crowded. There's 2 other buses that come up our way that are at least half empty. The bus routes range from 20 minutes long to 50 minutes long. If the demographics have changed so much in our district that our enrollment has changed so much, clearly kids aren't on the same bus routes anymore. So I really think that it would be very helpful to you in planning and looking at this start time piece to take a look at these bus routes, because drivers have on their routes stops that the kids have graduated high school. They're not even, they're not in the district anymore. So it really needs to be looked at and can really, I think, help with that piece.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. What else do we have?
Executive session.
Executive session. All right. We do have an executive session noticed on negotiations with the custodians union. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. We'll go into executive session for that purpose. We will come out of executive session into public session only to adjourn, and there will be no further public votes this evening. Thank you.
It'll be very brief.
Okay.